I'd like now to move on to introduce our final speaker of the conference. That's Andrew Jacobs, who's the head of the Digital Inclusion Unit at Welsh Government. We've heard a lot throughout the conference about what's happened to date, about the work of Communities 2.0 and other projects. I think Matt's presentation there actually, in a very exciting way, sets out one of the many challenges that we face in digital inclusion, which, apart from anything else, is keeping up with the terrifyingly rapid developments in technology that all of us have to get to grips with. So Andrew is going to talk to us about his view for the future around digital inclusion. I think, Andrew, you're going to talk for about half an hour and then we're going to have some discussion. Is that the idea? Okay, so over to Andrew Jacobs. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen, and good afternoon all. Those of you who may have heard me present in the past know that I like the comfort of my paper notes, but in the spirit of a digital inclusion conference, I've got my iPad here. Yeah, thanks. As Karen said, I head up the Digital Inclusion Unit, which is a small team in the Communities and Tackling Poverty department, and part of our role has been to oversee the Communities 2.0 programme. I just want to start by saying how great it is to be here and see so many familiar faces and so many new faces that have played such a key part in this important work area over the last 6 years. I can honestly say that this is one of the most rewarding days of my working career. I mean, the inspirational videos we saw before lunch, really make it hit home how important our work is, and just to be a very, very small part of that, is a good feeling. And we know from the awards this morning that, they were just a small sample of the people that have contributed to this work, and there are hundreds and thousands, more of those that we wish could have been recognised, and it's a shame they all can't be. So I hope you've enjoyed the conference thus far, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Catherine and her team and all the partners that have worked with us over the last 6 years. There's been a few challenges along the way, but we've always worked through them. And a particular thanks for the organisation of the conference, and on Catherine's birthday specifically, a big thanks for organising this well-run event. So, it's not over yet, though, because we've got an afternoon session talk about the future, and the Minister touched on some of the key issues, which I'll try to build on. I'll look a bit more at the policy context, why digital inclusion remains as big an issue as ever, including some of the key linkages, looking at what we've done to tackle it, the progress we've made, and our thinking on what's needed in the future. So I thought it was probably worth, at the end of the current programme, reinforcing what we see as digital inclusion or participation, because there's lots of different terms used interchangeably: digital skills, digital literacy, information literacy, and it can sometimes be confusing to some people. We know the digital world has changed considerably. We've just heard from Matt on that, since the programme started, with developments in technology bringing exciting new opportunities. But to us, digital inclusion is still essentially about improving people's lives through technologies. Our work remains rooted in social justice and equalities, and is absolutely key to the Welsh Government's tackling poverty and economic priorities. Digital inclusion to us is still about ensuring that people, both as citizens and consumers, can benefit from the rapid technological changes taking place. And this especially applies to people being able to use the internet in ways that enhance their lives and contribute to helping them overcome other disadvantages which they may face. And we saw some excellent examples of that this morning. To function in an increasingly digital world requires much more than being able to surf the internet. And I think the start of Communities 2.0, we were kind of at that starting point. But to truly secure the benefits of being online, individuals need to communicate more effectively online, be able to find and evaluate what they're looking for, and safely share personal information, whether it's a job application, undertaking a public service transaction, or buying online goods and services at reduced prices. And we know from our experience that trust and security remains an important issue for many, so we have to ensure that people know how to protect themselves online and their families from some of the threats. I know most of you here will no doubt appreciate the pace of change across this agenda. The difference in 6 years has been amazing. But if any of you are in any doubt, I've included some mind-blowing numbers here from the live internet stats site. And these numbers were taken at 5 o'clock one afternoon last week. And yes, civil servants are still at their desk at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They help show that more people are doing more and more things online, which is leaving those that are offline even further behind, deepening the digital divide. And I could point out any number of figures there, but I thought it was worth noting the number of websites hacked figure, just as a little reminder that we all need to protect ourselves. And thinking about my life, I mean, I don't see myself as a tech in any way, and my colleagues will certainly testify to that. But my everyday life and that of my family is pretty much a digital life. My son, who's 8, came home last October and was delighted to tell me that he was nominated as one of the class digital leaders. Obviously, I was very proud and asked him more about what the role involves. What it was all about was helping others in the class that maybe that were not fortunate enough to have an iPad at home, to develop their learning. So the class now has interactive sessions using the iPads to develop their learning skills, and it brings with it teamwork and skills and a whole range of other skills. And we know that interactive apps make learning fun, and while I struggled to get him to learn from the times table sheets that I bought a couple of years ago, he willingly, or maybe more reluctantly agreed is probably more accurate, to actually engage with the times table apps on, through the smartphone or iPad. And the things he's doing now on his iPad just absolutely blow me away to the point where I sometimes think he's leaving me behind. But as the Minister said yesterday, we mustn't think like that, and we must absolutely go with it. But this is just one example of the shift that is taking place in society. And I can't leave my daughter out, who's 3, and if I leave my smartphone or tablet hanging around, she knows how to access her favourite songs or videos from YouTube that are saved on the favourites in a matter of seconds. So if anyone's heard me humming So Long Farewell, Do Re Mi Edelweiss, it's because Sound of Music songs are on continuously at the moment, and I just can't get them out of my head. And a personal example of how digital inclusion is all around us, how it's almost being embedded naturally in society. When my body could no longer take the bumps and bruises of that sport with the oval ball, I decided to take up golf. Yeah, there's a few groans from the women there. But a couple of years ago, my golf club, which I know there's some negative perceptions and stereotypes around golf, but my golf club is pretty much a good mix of all social classes and ages. And a couple of years ago, they took the decision to go digital. And to my mind, it's absolutely, turned the club around. There was an online booking system where members and visitors could book times. They improved the website. They increased their social media coverage and interaction. They stopped sending letters by post and did everything by email. And I think there's been much more engagement with membership and visitors alike. But there was real resistance from some quarters. I mean, all the members said that, oh, look, you know, we are going to be disadvantaged, we are going to be left out because we can't book a tea time. But naturally, you know, digital inclusion provision was put in. There was a PC put in the foyer, and almost immediately, members who were familiar with technology were helping those that had never touched a computer previously to book online. And there were still assisted digital channels as well. I mean, they could still go to the pro shop, you know, drive up there and book a time, or try and ring. But we all know that's more inconvenient because pro might not be there, you know, nobody answering the phone. So, you know, to me, that really mirrors the convenience of internet and online service provision across society. Because if you're an internet user, you have a distinct advantage over non-internet users. So going back to the golf club, I mean, this was for many their first taste, and I've seen members who now, because they found something that mattered to them, have actually purchased a tablet, got a broadband connection, and this was their first step to a digital world. So, what's the position in Wales? This infographic gives a quick snapshot. These are the numbers from last year's National Survey for Wales, which was published in May. So we expect these to have, you know, fallen further, and the next lot of results are out in June. So while we've continued to make good progress, there's still some way to go. 21% of all Welsh adults are still not regularly online, and this is a similar figure to other regions across the UK. This rises to 40% for disabled people. Wales has less households with fixed broadband access and more exclusively access the internet through their mobile. Wales has the highest percentage of mobile-only households in Wales, and we were discussing this a bit in Terry's workshop this morning on affordable broadband for social housing. And I think that highlights some deprivation issues, really. The infographic also highlights some of the differences between the most deprived and least deprived local authority areas across Wales. You can see figures for Blaenau, Gwent and Cardiff there. But we know even within Cardiff there's, you know, serious pockets of deprivation which we need to support. Motivation and attitudes are still the main barrier. People feel they don't want to or need to go online, but we recognise we need to unpick that a bit more from the national survey, and we've commissioned some research which follows up with respondents to the National Survey for Wales to ask them a bit more about why they don't go online, and if they have gone online since the last survey, what changed their view. Many of you will have seen this triangle before, so apologies for that, and I thought long and hard about how I could represent this differently, but do you know what? It still remains the best way, I feel, of effectively demonstrating the interconnectedness of some of the different strands. Implementing Digital Wales is a programme for government commitment. It's a pan-government approach that builds the 5 integrated strands into one coherent story, one overall goal, and it recognises that no one strand can operate in isolation. So even though it's been around for some time now, I feel it's still as relevant as ever. You'll see it's all underpinned by a high-quality infrastructure, and our Superfast Cymru programme is doing much to help ensure that we've got a first-class infrastructure for the future. And there's still a £1,000 grant available for some time for those that still haven't got sufficient bandwidth, anything less than 2 meg. You can see digital inclusion. We're at the top of the triangle, helping to create the overall culture that maximises the impact of the other strands. Above public service delivery, we're all aware of the move to public services going online, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. I mentioned the example of my son, and I think that demonstrates the huge amount of work that's going on in schools. and the digital economy as well, the significant investment going into supporting digital business. So whilst the focus today is on inclusion, we can't tackle this without linking to the other strands. I want to say a bit more on online public services because the two agendas are increasingly converging to the point where, in many cases, they're being seen as one and the same thing. Digital inclusion is obviously closely linked to the shift to online public services, and both agendas can help each other, as we'll come on to see. Firstly, to say, I think there's an inevitable shift to public services online, and citizens should absolutely be able to access high-quality digital public services at a time which suits them. And we know that is the preferred method of use for the majority of people. And there's a programme for government commitment to use technology to provide better and most cost-effective public services for all citizens, businesses and communities. But that doesn't mean there's a push to put everything online. Selection must be based on the costs and benefits, designed around the user and to the highest standards in terms of accessibility, usability, security and reliability. We know about the UK government's digital by default policy, including welfare reform. Talk a bit more about that later. And the Welsh Government is committed to a digital first policy. We've had the over 50s health checks, which were primarily online, and Communities 2.0, I know, has engaged with that. And there's scope to assist with the wider challenges facing the health sector. I know there's a workshop on that this morning. But it's absolutely important that people are not left behind. So we know that the digital elements of welfare reform have raised the profile of digital inclusion. We know universal credit is going to present major challenges, but I think it will also act as another driver to get people to use the internet for the first time, which could then lead to people being able to do more online. But I've highlighted there, but support will have to be provided to do this. There's alternative channels should remain in place for those that will struggle to get online, and assisted digital provision, like I mentioned with my earlier example, telephony channels, face-to-face channels will still be required. Local authorities and housing associations are now much more engaged in this agenda, and we've helped establish local authority-wide initiatives that tackle digital exclusion and financial exclusion. Job Centre Plus are much more involved than they were, and now they have many more access points in job centres, and they are providing a digital inclusion function. And the well-established partnerships with libraries, Job Centre Plus and Communities 2.0 have helped to reach this point, and these established partnerships, as I think Catherine said yesterday, will absolutely continue after Communities 2.0. So I just wanted to say a bit more about how I see digital inclusion fitting into the tackling poverty agenda. My flicking of the iPad went a bit haywire there. Yeah, so technology cuts across all of these. Financial inclusion, for example, we can't be truly financially included if you're not online, because we know the best financial products, the cheapest goods and services, and the best budget management tools are online. Communities First. I know there's a lot of people from Communities First here, and most clusters have identified digital inclusion as a priority need and are delivering activities. Families First and Flying Start. Our most in-need families will need digital skills support to help find employment, make their money go further, and engage more effectively with their children. And we link it into the LIFT programme through LIFT Mentors. And I was at a workshop last week, and the 2 examples that the LIFT Mentor gave were basically about digital inclusion. You know, the person that they supported didn't have any digital skills, and they actually helped them to move beyond that. And there's emerging European Social Fund programmes, employment and skills programmes, where digital inclusion will be embedded, and we're absolutely keen to ensure that ESF bids will take account of digital inclusion. So, whilst the main focus of this event is talking about the future, I just thought it was worth a quick whistle-stop tour of where we've come and how far we've come before we moved on to that. As I think has already been mentioned, we've been doing digital inclusion now in Wales pretty much for 10 years. And it started off with Communities at 1 in 2005. And at that point, there was very little experience. And we supported largely small islands of activity, around about 200 projects, which weren't necessarily sustainable. Following Communities at 1, we managed to get a large-scale European-funded Communities 2.0 programme off the ground. And in the early years, again, there was still no policy framework around that. And then in 2010-11, with the help of the framework and delivery plan, which I think focused the agenda a bit more, and we managed to get a really good statistical base, which allowed us to set, meaningful and challenging targets. And I think from that point on, we've really moved forward. And, we've gone from 785,000 people being offline at the end of 2010 to just under 500,000 last May. And I think in the second year of Communities 2.0, we focused much more on partnerships, expanded the geographical areas to reach more people, and have focused much more on mainstreaming digital inclusion across key policy areas. And that example of LIFT and some of the other examples, the Tackling Poverty programmes, I think help demonstrate that. So partnership working, I would say, has been the focus in the second half of the programme, as I said, because we know that the scale and complexities of this problem mean that everyone needs to buy into it. It's long been recognised that no one organisation can do this alone. And I think the funding through Communities 2.0 has helped kind of engage more organisations and helped some of these delivery partnerships to flourish. And in many cases, they were relatively small sums of money which have been able to demonstrate to potential partners the value of this work to them, their organisations, with a view to continuing this when funding ends. We've actively supported organisations that work with all our priority groups, plus many more groups that don't necessarily fit neatly into the four main priority groups. And there are numerous examples of these, some of which you saw earlier, but there are so many more. And I'd encourage you to go on the Communities 2.0 website to see many more case studies and examples of how the programme has helped. The private sector have a lot to offer this agenda, and increasingly they've become more engaged in partnerships. The Minister yesterday referred to the contribution Barclays, for example, has made through its Digital Eagles initiative, which Communities 2.0 has helped support. Most, if not all of us, would have seen the Barclays adverts, which have really helped raise the profile of digital inclusion in Wales. I think the first one was a miner in Glynneath, I think, who had no digital inclusion skills. And the latest one on coding is an example of how we can encourage children to take the first steps in developing the high-level digital skills that employers are crying out for. And when I speak to people that I haven't seen for several years and they ask me what I'm doing now, and I tell them, I'm involved in digital inclusion, helping more people online, many say, like the Barclays advert. And I think that just shows to me the power and the reach that the private sector can have, maybe that we sometimes struggle with. So what's planned in the final few months of the current programme? Well, we'll continue to look to maximise the reach and impact through the ongoing National Outreach Programme activities. We'll look to maximise the programme's legacy and return on Welsh Government and European investment. And we'll meet the European programme closure requirements. If anyone's been involved in the European programme, you'll know that's no easy task. And we'll work with partners to plan the sustainability of Communities 2.0. We'll continue to publicise achievements and lessons learned, and we've done that through the conference, the legacy document. And we'll take account of the ongoing independent evaluation. I think it's important to reinforce what the Minister said yesterday, that Welsh Government is fully committed to digital inclusion going forward. It will remain a key social justice and equalities issue and will increasingly have stronger links to public service delivery as more services go online. It will remain key to several strategic priorities. Only last year we revised our delivery plan to set more challenging targets to 2015 and 17. But we all know there's less money around. So whilst there's no dedicated European-funded digital inclusion programme, digital inclusion will be mainstreamed as part of European employment and skills programmes, as digital inclusion will remain one of the number of barriers that people need to overcome when they find their work, because we know that it's almost impossible to find work without ICT skills. So there's much more activity going on now which needs to be coordinated. We continue to need to take advantage of regular campaigns like Get Online Week, Adult Learners Week, Safer Internet Day. And as public services continue to move online, assisted digital support is needed to help people move to independently using online services, and this will help to push up the basic digital skills, many of which will be transferable, and encourage more people to do more online. We're currently in the latter stages of procurement for a successor programme, but our thinking is very much in tune with what key partners have been saying is needed now. The digital inclusion field is much more developed. The tender that we put out there identified a slim, agile body of expertise which can help to develop strong partnerships across sectors with a team of outreach experts that can demonstrate best practice in encouraging digitally excluded people, helping the many organisations do this themselves. Developing and coordinating volunteers will continue to be an absolute key part of any successor programme. So a requirement was that experience of engaging volunteers to support this work was a must. So just to reinforce some of the key issues, the digital inclusion agenda is more important than ever. There's an inevitability of digital technologies, but people can't be left behind as the scope for the digital divide to deepen. There's a need for digital inclusion initiatives to continue to engage as many people as possible. Single organisations or programmes can't tackle this alone, as it's so cross-cutting. Digital inclusion needs to be mainstreamed across society, and it needs to be embedded in the DNA of organisations. And we know that welfare reforms and other public services are coming around the corner, which makes this even more of a necessity. So that just about brings my talk to an end, and I put my contact details up there, so please feel free to contact us. But just as kind of introduction to the breakout session, even though we're about to appoint a lead organisation to take forward a successor programme, it doesn't mean that you in the room and others can't influence the future direction of digital inclusion in Wales. As I said, although we updated our delivery plan last year, which includes a number of revised targets, we'll be revising our strategic framework later this year, because the original framework, which was published in 2010, assumed a 5-year lifespan, which is quickly approaching the end. So we'll be revising our strategic framework and updating our delivery plan a year on. And although we haven't got a large-scale, big budget programme like the £20 million Communities First programme, we have got a much more developed landscape which needs that effective coordination and support to further develop it. And just walking around the conference and being in workshops, I feel there's a genuine appetite from the people in this room and inside your organisations to continue supporting this work. But I think it'll be great to get a feel for what collectively we can do more of to ensure even greater progress in this work. So I've just put up some questions for you to think about in the breakout sessions, but please don't restrict yourself to these. Feel free to take it where you want to. And I think we've got 20 to 30 minutes on our tables, and then we come back, and I'm happy to take comments and questions from tables or individually before we close the conference. Thank you very much. I guess if you raise your hand, and somebody will come across and take your question or comment. Thank you.
Hi. Quite a lot of comments I'd like to make, but given the time, just two things. One of your slides ended with the ball for poverty. All right? I think you've missed the link, because below that should be strong, healthy communities. Quite seriously, because you can eradicate poverty in one sense, and I tell you, within 5 years, you've got the division back again. If you have communities that still believe they're not as good as next door, you've got to get the communities themselves right, first of all. And the other, more pressing thing is the apparent demotion of the importance of volunteers. And I say that as a chair of an organisation which is a voluntary organisation, and we've got volunteers who've done over 300 hours. We've got a couple of the Millennium volunteers and a load of others who in fact don't qualify because they're over 25. And they're all doing it because they want to, because they believe in what they're doing. We will not be able to survive, frankly, if we have to find the money to find the kit for those people to go out and deliver what everybody else says is needed. I mean, it's the straight resource bit, but more importantly, as you went through the list of things there, to me, the volunteer element seemed to be an afterthought. And in addition to that, voluntary organisations did not appear to be featuring in your programme. You were talking about linked up organisation type things. We're in partnership already, and we're more than happy to work with anybody, but at the moment, the way things are going from what the Welsh Government appears to be doing, we're going to have major problems in staying afloat. And why that is bad is because we're the 68th most deprived ward in Wales. I've worked for the last 12, 14 years to stop when the money runs out on Communities First, and thank God for Communities First. my community doesn't go down the same way as it has in the previous times when we've had government regeneration schemes. The moment the money dries up, the house of cards falls flat. And that's why I and my colleagues are trying to do this today, because it gives an opportunity for our community to get stronger. I rather hope that Welsh Government, in fact, would be thinking along the same lines.
Okay, thanks. There's a few points there which I'll try and address. Firstly, you know, we see volunteers as absolutely key to this agenda, and I think I mentioned volunteers in there being central to the new programme, and the coordination of those volunteers being key to continue to reach the people that we need to. We sit in the Communities and Tackling Poverty division, and much of our work and the work at Communities 2.0 has been around building strong, healthy communities, and we work closely with Communities First. And you know, Communities First is doing great work in their areas. You mentioned kit, and it cropped up in yesterday's discussion as well. The kit from the current programme will still be available to communities in the new programme. And because it's a European funded programme, we have to meet closure requirements, get an asset register and everything sorted. But afterwards, that kit will be available to be used in the community. And, you know, we fully recognise the input of the voluntary sector. I think, you know, I recognised it's absolutely embedding partnerships across the private, public and third sectors. And, you know, the third sector, I mean, the current lead partner in the programme is a third sector organisation. One of the other partners is PAVS, you know, specialises in volunteering. So, you know, we absolutely see organisations like yourselves being key to helping to tackle this issue. I hope that addresses some of your points.
Diolch yn fawr. Swn i'n hoffi gofyn cwestiwn yn Gymraeg. I'd like to ask my question in Welsh, please.
Sincere apologies for not having this on.
Diolch yn fawr am cyflwyniad. Dwi'n meddwl un o'r materion sy'n ystyried bwysig iawn ydy'r trydydd pwynt o ran yr blaenoriaethu. Ac tra mae rhywun yn cytuno o'r angen i fod yn blaenoriaethu, dwi'n meddwl bod yr diffiniad o ardaloedd mwy.
Yeah, can you repeat that, please?
Okay now?
You go again, please.
Yeah.
Can I have one of these ones, please? Yeah, this one's working. This one's fine. Yeah. Sorry.
Fel yn dweud, diolch yn fawr iawn am y cyflwyniad a'r cyfrif sylwadau. Dwi'n meddwl un o'r pethau oedd yn codi o'n bwrdd ni oedd ar y trydydd pwynt ynglyn â blaenoriaethu. Ac tra bod rhywun yn cytuno o'r angen.
It's not coming through. It's not working. Possibly. Yeah, it's one up. Sorry.
Di pawb gael clywed o'n? Oce, fel ni'n dweud, diolch am y cyflwyniad a cyfle roed ymatab. Is everyone? Yeah. Dim ond y pwynt ni eisiau godi oedd yng nghyswllt y trydydd pwynt ych chi'n godi. Felly tra mae rhywun yn cytuno ar angen i fod yn blaenoriaethu. Dwi'n meddwl peth pwysig oedd y codi yn bwrdd ni oedd ar ran y diffiniad o ardaloedd drifreintiedig yn cyd-destun yma. Eisiau holi o'n ynglyn a ydych chi'n mynd i fod yn dilyn patrwm o amddifadau cyffredinol neu os ymwneud ffocws mynd i fod ar ardaloedd sydd wedi eithrio yn ddigidol a ardaloedd sydd wedi cael eithrio ar sail mynediad i wasanaethau. Cos eich bod yr ardaloedd sydd wedi eithrio yn ddigidol dim o'r reidrwydd pob amser yn cyd-fynd yn union o'r ardaloedd difreintiedig yn gyffredinol.
I mean, I'll have a go at doing that, and as I say, feel free to come in if I missed anything there. But I think the essence of the question was, you know, in the new programme, the extent to which we're going to focus on the more deprived areas against, we know that there are a number of priority groups, and there are areas, you know, outside the most deprived areas where people, large numbers are digitally excluded, you know, exist. So I think the question was how the new programme is actually going to actually address digital exclusion on an all-Wales basis. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and the definition of deprivation in the context of the programme, whether that's solely on the basis of multiple deprivation or digital deprivation or access to services.
Well, firstly to say, and as Communities 2.0 in the latter stages operated on an all-Wales basis, and that's what we're looking to do in the next programme. The tender we put out there said there would be a focus on the most deprived, but we didn't define that deliberately so. And I think what we also said in the tender was that we would look to plug gaps and avoid duplication. We know that there's a lot going on, and I talked about Communities First building it into their mechanisms. So we don't see, you know, a new programme necessarily, you know, operating in a particular area where there's already existing activity. So the new programme will very much be a national programme that will actually meet the needs of the priority groups that we've identified, coordinating with all manner of organisations that allow us to reach the digitally excluded population.
Hi, I actually come from Monmouthshire, and my colleague and I work for Monmouthshire County Council. Over the last couple of days, and really over our work with Communities 2.0, it's really become clear how important and useful the links with Communities First is. In Monmouthshire, we don't have Communities First. Communities 2.0 have kind of allowed us to do a lot of the work that Communities First do in other areas. I'm really concerned that after this programme ends, we're not going to have the linkage to carry on with the work that other areas will be doing through Communities First. So what we would really love to see is an opportunity to network pan Wales rather than just within the authority, because we obviously are missing that valuable focus with the Communities First.
Okay, thanks for that. You know, we know through the WLGA there's opportunities for local authorities to come together and network, and I see the move to more digital online public services really accelerating the need for those discussions across local authorities. And I hope that the partnerships that Communities 2.0 has helped develop in Monmouthshire will be strong enough to continue post Communities 2.0. I know, you know, you've got well-established financial inclusion network in Monmouthshire, and the libraries have been very engaged in the Communities 2.0 project that it's supported. So even though there's no Communities First areas there, I think there should be enough partnerships with an interest in this agenda, housing associations and the like, to come together and continue to tackle this issue in Monmouthshire. I hope that kind of goes some way to addressing your concern. If it doesn't, please come back at me.
Dwi'n am ofyn yng nghwestiwn yn y Gymraeg os di hynny'n iawn. Da chi wedi cyfeirio yn y cyflwyniad am bwysigrwydd gweithio mewn partneriaeth, a dwi'n meddwl ym mhob sir bod hynny yn gweithio ar y llawr. Ond be mae'r sleid ar be sy'n digwydd o ran y maes yn ei ddangos yr holl brosiectau sydd yn digwydd o fewn maes tackling poverty. Mae hwnnw yn dangos i ni bod na elfenna ar draws bob un o'r hynna sydd yn mynd ar drwodd. Mae yna elfen o addysg yn bron bob un o'r strands yna sydd yn cael ei effeithio. A dwi'n meddwl bod yn bwysig iawn bod Llywodraeth Cymru yn edrych arnyn nhw eu hunan i ddechrau. Da ni'n gweithio yn siroedd mewn partneriaeth. Mae'n hanfodol bod y Llywodraeth fel adranna o fewn y Llywodraeth yn dechrau siarad hefo'i gilydd mwyn cydlynu a sicrhau bod rhaglenni fel hyn yn bwydo mewn ag ar draws a bod ariannu yn digwydd yn hafal. Mae yna arian yn cael ei dynnu o'r maes addysg oedolion yn benodol, ond mae yna raglenni fel hyn yn bwydo mewn ag yn cyflwyno yr elfenna addysg yna. Ond lle mae yna sicrwydd bod yna safon ac yn y blaen yn digwydd, mae'n hanfodol bod yna drafodaethau'n digwydd o fewn y Llywodraeth i gychwyn i gael yr eglur had yn ar draws y bwrdd i bob un o'r partneriaid a bob un o'r strands fod yn siarad efo'i gilydd.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to feedback on the question, really, it was mainly about partnerships and particularly in relation to the slide I put up there, how technology cuts across all tackling poverty programs, and the point was made that we need to ensure there needs to be discussions across Welsh Government to ensure that it is embedded in all programs and funding is equally dispersed, spread out, and education as well fits in with each of those tackling poverty programs. And it was highlighted that some of the cuts in adult education might have an impact, and I think the comment was that it's necessary for Welsh Government to ensure that discussions are had across all those strands to make sure that digital and other key priorities like education are flowing through those. Is that a fair summary?
Just adding discussions amongst the Welsh Government departments as well, as to how cuts in some areas will affect and have a knock-on effect, because tackling poverty can't just be done by getting people digitally included. A lot of people who we have encountered during digital inclusion programs like Communities 2.0 have other issues which need to be addressed, which have to come before getting them digitally included, such as low literacy skills. I mean, if you want somebody to fill in a benefits form online and they have low literacy skills, which can't be addressed because we can't get engagement activities happening to get them onto the programs that they need to be going on, it's very difficult to then get them digitally literate.
Absolutely, 100% agree, and discussions are ongoing across departments in Welsh Government. I think the digital space has been a real example where through those strands, those discussions have taken place. But in terms of tackling poverty, I know, the tackling poverty team in our department works very closely with health, education and other departments, because there absolutely has to, because they're the determining factors really which influence poverty. So yeah, we are having those ongoing discussions, and we'll continue to do so really. But 100% agree. Thank you. If
we're done there, just to allow us just 10 minutes to wrap up the conference with some concluding remarks, just to say thank you, Andrew, on behalf of all of us, for giving your time, for being here for the 2 days, and for giving your time to give us an overview and answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It's fallen on me, really, to make some of the closing remarks. I think Andrew's stolen a lot of my thunder already with his slides. My name's Terry Price, and I've worked with Communities 2.0 now for the last six years. But before that, very involved in Communities at One and the setup of that. And I'll go back a little bit in a moment to talk about some of the history and how we've got to where we are and perhaps where we're going in the future. But I think the one abiding memory for me of the conference, going out of it now after this afternoon, on the one hand, you know, if you've seen the film Snow White, and you see the dwarfs going off to their cave to work or whatever, and they're all singing away. I think every time I go past the offices in Merthyr now, I'll think somewhere in the, you know, right down there in the middle of the building somewhere, there's a little office where there's a group of people in the digital inclusion unit with a piped version of The Sound of Music there with Karen Lewis actually singing. You know, that's the way I'd look at it. Yeah, I just sort of want to reflect back really because having been involved in these programs over the last 10 years plus, it's been a little bit like an onion and peeling back the different layers. And when I'm going to embarrass a couple of people here by naming them, but when a few of us sat in a room over 10 years ago now, you've got Alan Burge up there, he stayed to the end, and Karen Lewis here, a couple that are still around, just doing some blue skies thinking about situation then. And we talked about something called the digital divide. And somebody called Brian Moon within Welsh Government identified a pot of money that the old WDA had allocated to it through European monies, and that was going to be spent on a whole list of super-duper technology centres around Wales. And just thinking back then that the way in which people sort of dealt with these sort of things was to find a building, put a suite of computers in, and then everything would happen. And of course it didn't. And I think the big thing was sitting in the room then with Alan and Karen and others and actually do some blue skies thinking about what needed to change. And really that was very much about, well, this isn't really a thing about technology. It's about people. It's very much about people who are going to lose out in future because of this thing called a digital divide. And it's really a social justice and it's an anti-poverty thing, you know, thinking that all that time back. The problem was nobody thought that way, so we came up with a project, tried to focus it on a community development approach, and just show people that different approaches would work. You know, it was a little bit limited because of time, and we had to do it in a specific way, but it gave time to show that you could actually go out there, work at a community level with small amounts of money, and you could actually make quite significant changes. When that came to an end, and I think, again, the discussions, we were quite surprised at the time. If you remember, Alan, we talked about policy, what's that? But by the time that program had ended, it was beginning to have an impact on policy and the way things thought, you know, people thought within Welsh Government and elsewhere. The Communities 2 came along, very much looked at what the lessons of the previous program. You know, part of it is this approach works. You know, it works if you go through people. That's the best way of doing it. But also it needs to be joined up far more. And I think we took the approach then that rather than small little tiny projects here and there, that we needed to pull that into a much more strategic view. When that was all done, it was all put together, a wonderful business plan went to Europe. The economy was booming in those days. When it came to implementation a year or so later, the economy was crashing and the world was changing. But not only did we have a business plan from the European, from WEFO, we also then, Welsh Government came along and said, well, how about getting a few people online as well? And we sort of talked about it, and I think we came up with a figure. We said, we'll get 20,000 people online, and at the time, I think a few of us gulped and thought, oh my God, there's no way we're going to do this plus the business plan. But, you know, the results of that we've seen over the last couple of days, not only did we get 20,000 online, it's probably closer to 60,000, as well as achieving most of the stuff within the business plan. So from our point of view, to sit here now, or stand here sort of 6 years later, actually see the conference, see all the different workshops, the spread of activities, the number of people touched, you know, the awards are incredible, I thought, today. Just seeing how it's impacted on people personally, that brings it really home to you. About the sort of work that can be done if you take the right approach. So to be standing here now looking at that, you know, it really is quite an achievement, I think, for Catherine and the entire team, you know, the partners, everybody else, the digital inclusion unit, having worked together over that period. You know, and I've worked a lot on different projects. Most of them are relatively easy to work on because you know where you're going. this has been the one project where the goalpost changed every 6 months. You think you've got it right, somebody else changes policy, a minister changes, somebody somewhere in government in England decides they're going to have welfare reform. It was constantly changing all the way through, and the approach had to be adjusted and varied and adapted to. So to actually be able to do that while maintaining the focus, for me, has been quite incredible. When I look back as well, that early stuff was very much around, you don't necessarily have to be technical to do this. It's about community development and justice. The approach this time round has been much more about sort of joining that up, linking it into other programs. So for me, picking out some of the information that Andrew presented about where the program's going, the whole thing about being joined up, linking into other programs, that's one of the big lessons out of it. There are lots of other people can do this work if they've got the courage to do it, the confidence to do it, and lots of them are actually resourced to do it. They just haven't realized it quite often. It's taken a long time for the penny to drop. Going in sort of 6 years ago, talking to housing associations about these sort of issues, people just look at you blankly. It was probably a year or two into the project before a lot of those sort of more obvious organizations that were working with the individuals that we were targeting began to get the message. And even now, quite a few probably have part of the message within certain parts of the organization, other parts within others. It's not completely there, but it's not far off. But I think looking forward, clearly the next project, it's not going to have the same resources going with it. But within that, there's still significant monies to coordinate and pull stuff together and make things happen. And lots of other programs can be delivered in that time. But when you look at it in the staged process long term, I think the thing that strikes me is that it needs to be mainstreamed. Everything needs to be joined up. You can't just be digitally excluded. You'll have lots of other things going against you as well that all need to be addressed in a joined up way. But there probably are monies out there that can allow this to happen. They're just not necessarily being used sensibly by people who have them. And for me, within that, it's how do you unlock some of those resources within, say, health departments, local authorities, elsewhere, that could actually, with a little bit of sleight of hand, actually save them monies and at the same time get to a lot of people. So I think the next trick for me is very much around trying to get those people who've got some of the purse strings, changing some of their opinions, getting them to rethink how they do budgets, and to begin to maybe shift accordingly over time. That way, I think the resources potentially are there to sort of work with. So, it's a step-by-step process, really. So it's changed over time. And it'll continue to change as well, as we know from the last 6 years. What we're now talking about now, somebody's bound to come along and blindside us in 6 months from government somewhere, Ian Duncan Smith has still got a while to go, hasn't he? But so it's that sort of change that we're looking for. I think standing here, looking at the project, the achievements, it's hit numbers, it's been innovative, it's changed attitudes, it's begun to draw things together, and really it just needs to continue. So in closing remarks, I hope that everyone really, in a sense, has enjoyed the 2 days. I found it sort of fascinating. 18 workshops in itself probably speaks of something, the volume of work. I just hope that sort of can continue and we just don't lose some of the expertise and skills that we got over this period of time and built up so carefully. So it's being very careful, people like Andrew and so on, to make sure you keep some of those skills going forward. The other thing about the conference, which I'd like to say, is clearly a conference is only as successful as the people who turned up. It's been great to have such a big number turning up, staying here even at this late time of the afternoon. But it's been incredibly well organized. And I'm hoping that all of you will have got as much out of it as perhaps I have. I've certainly gone away with quite a few new ideas, and I've probably gotten by a Raspberry Pi at some point. But anyway, I'd like to just thank you for coming along and hope there'll be another conference in a year or two with another successful project that's just taking this program forward. So really thank you, and I wish you a good journey back home. Thank you.